Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Grandma Show, where Tom and T chats with Bob Dub. Before we get started, please take note that the following content is aimed at a mature listening audience. Graphic and explicit language may be used at times, and listeners' discretion is advised. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual hosts or guests on this show do not necessarily express those of this or any other platform, nor of any of the sponsors of any of these platforms.
I'm not really that dangerous. I'm just walking around. You go, sweet little cow. This is a pretty little cow.
Listeners are advised that neither this platform nor its owners or agents shall be held liable for the content of this program. None of the material contained within this program may be rebroadcast, redistributed, or reused without the express written permission of the hosts or producer.
Hi everybody, this is our special Halloween gathering for the Love Rebellion chats, and we've got a big group today. We have Chris Dogood, she goes by WD Lady, but you might have seen her on Minds as Badass Row. We have Robert Van Dusen, Eric Marr, and Bob Dub and me. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun today, and we've kind of figured out how we're going to do this. We're going to have Robert go first and read a story. And after Robert, we can have a little short time to talk a little bit and then go to the next one.
So Robert's going to read for us, but we need to know the context of what he's reading. So over to you, Robert.
It's from a novella that I published a couple of years ago called The Night Shift. It's a vampire story set in a small town in Wisconsin, and yeah, it's just, I kind of tried to play a little bit with the like all of the tropes of the genre, and trying not everybody hates it now when you say subverting expectations, but because it generally just means we're going to do some off-the-wall stuff, and if you don't like it, well, too bad. But I actually did try to play a little bit with the genre, but, like the tropes of the genre a little bit. But, yeah. People, it's set in a small, a small town, and I based it on, I actually came up with the original idea for it. There's one of my choose your own adventure stories is, I just basically took the basic plot of the choose your own adventure story that I did called The Night Shift and adapted it to a novel.
That's
so
okay.
I changed everything in the novel just enough so that you can do both. You can you can read the novel and you can play, read whatever it is, the story, the choose your own adventure story, and you'll have a different experience both times.
Right, yes. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, we're looking forward to it. We'll hear it in a second.
Yeah.
So for now, we're just going to start out with Robert. So Robert, you can just read your story and then we'll talk up when you're done.
Okay. This is the first chapter for my vampire novella called The Night Shift. I just decided to read the first chapter of it. But kind of bear with me. I'm reading it off my phone.
That's fine.
Joe Dawson frowned at the copy of the Hot Rod International he had open on the counter as he slowly tried to make sense of the article about the late lamented 1971 Plymouth Hemi Cuda. Reading had always been a struggle for him, as he had trouble with the big words, and if he tried to go too fast, even the small ones got all jumbled together until he was looking at gibberish. Joe was in his late 30s, prematurely balding, and carrying around about 24 or so extra pounds around his middle under his black gas and gold t-shirt. He had made it as far as 8th grade before more or less giving up on formal education, which was just as well. His daddy always used to say, the world needs ditch diggers too. Besides, the car magazines had some sweet pictures too, and not just of the vintage muscle cars. A tiny grin spread over his features as he took in the smoking hot blonde in a little bikini that looked like it was made out of dental floss and not much else on the 2-page spread before him. She was posed suggestively on the hood of a shiny, mint-conditioned, candy apple red 67 Corvette convertible, back arched and lips parted slightly as she stretched languidly on the hood of the muscle car. "God damn," Joe whispered admiringly as he let the callous pad of his index finger play over this glossy photograph, taking up the page. The sound of tires on the tarmac outside snapped him out of his trance. Joe scowled into the darkness beyond the halogen lamps mounted over the gas pumps as he tried to get a look at the vehicle. A slow grin spread across his features, and he closed the magazine. He hurriedly tried to get it out of sight as the tan and cream Ford Crown Victoria from the Woodard County Sheriff's Department pulled up to Pump 5. A brown-haired woman in the dark brown slacks and tan uniform shirt climbed out, giving the area a quick once-over as she hitched the white duty belt around her slender waist. Joe turned on the pump and waited while she gassed up. He wiped his clammy palms on his jeans, steeling himself as Deputy County Sheriff Molly Cooper walked toward the store. "Oh, goddamn. I says goddamn," Joe thought admiringly as he smoothed his lank, dark hair back. She was pretty tall, nearly coming up to his shoulder, with light brown hair pinned up and these great blue eyes. There had been an article in the paper when Molly got hired that said something about her going to college on an athletics scholarship or something, and Joe believed it from the look of her. "Hey, Joe," Molly called with a cheerful little wave as she entered the gas and gulp and made a beeline for the row of coffee pots steaming away on hot plates on the other side of the store. "How's things?" she asked while selecting a large paper cup and filled it with regular. Her cobalt blue eyes flitted around towards the fisheye mirror in the corner over the coolers at the back of the store, just in time to see Joe turn away. She made a slight face as she added a couple packets of sugar and creamers to the coffee and popped on one of the white plastic lids. Joe shifted on his stool behind the counter and cleared his throat as she turned to face him. He was almost certain that she had caught him checking her out in the mirror, though. Damn, it was hard not to look when she turned around. "Pretty good, you?" he asked, as Molly stepped up by the little refrigerator stand near the register and picked out a sandwich. She set the coffee and sandwich in its plastic container on the counter, then dug out the county gas card, which Joe dutifully ran through the scanner and passed back. In a few moments, the register spat out a receipt for $23.05, which he handed over with a flourish that earned him one of those secret little smiles she gave out on occasion as Molly put the slip into her trouser pocket. "Pretty slow so far," Molly rapped gently on the counter with her knuckles as she fished a billfold out of her back pocket and waited for Joe to ring up her sandwich and coffee. Frank Parker, the manager of the Mason Creek Gas and Gulp, offered free coffee to cops, especially those that worked the night shift, though Molly rarely took advantage of it. In practice, it was a pretty smart idea. If anyone was going to rob the place, they never knew when a cop might be stopping by for a cup of joe. It also apparently gave Mr. Parker the idea that he could use this as a get-out-of-jail-free card when he got pulled over for speeding, or he left his Cadillac double-parked on Main Street, or one of the neighbors complained about his kids' parties being too loud for some reason. She produced a $5 bill and a single once Joe tallied everything up. He dropped a quarter and a dime into the palm of her hand. You know, that new Clint Eastwood movie's coming out this Friday, Joe suggested as he let his hands rest on the counter. His lips writhed like a couple of spastic earthworms under his nose as he worked up the nerve to finish the second part of the question. Oh, geez, Joe thought when he saw Molly's eyebrows start to draw towards each other in an expression of mild confusion. The radio on Molly's duty belt made a loud blaring noise followed by a burst of what sounded like nonsense to Joe. She reached for the hand mic clipped to the shoulder of her uniform shirt and thumbed the talk button. "Roger, dispatch, car 3-4 responding," Molly said, tilting her lips closer to the plastic square. It was hard to miss the tone of relief in the young woman's voice. Sorry, gotta go," she said with a small apologetic shrug as she snatched up the sandwich and coffee before turning and rushing out the door. About half an hour later, the gravel of the driveway crunched under the cruiser's tires as Molly pulled up to the light green ranch house. Dispatch had said there was a burglary reported at the McLean residence, wherein the complainant had spotted somebody running away from his barn. Well, this should be interesting, she thought as she opened the car door and stepped out of the vehicle, heading for the front porch. A tall, lanky man in jeans and a red and black flannel shirt opened the front door and stepped out on the porch to greet her as she got closer. "Hello, Mr. McLean," Molly said as she reached the stairs to the porch. "What seems to be the trouble, sir?" "Somebody stole one of my damn sheep is what?" Daniel McLean snapped as he came down off the porch and shook his head, ran a palm over his salt and pepper crew cut, and planted his hands on his hips. "Sorry, officer." The farmer smiled shamefacedly at the gravel between his feet for a moment before turning his attention back to the young policewoman. "Come on, and I'll show you what I mean." She noted the butt of the revolver in his hip pocket, but thought little of it. Lots of people that lived outside town had guns, and lots of them in town for that matter as well. The state land north of town sounded like a shooting gallery on the opening day of deer season every fall. Also, she had been a grade behind Dan Jr., Daniel McLean's son, in school, and had helped raise funds for the charity 5K fun run to help with his late wife's cancer treatments. So there was that. Molly nodded, reaching for the notepad and ballpoint pen in the breast pocket of her uniform. "Okay, well, tell me what happened," she said, flipping to a blank page as she prepared to take down the man's statement. The McLeans had a small barn and a big backyard, which he had turned into a pasture for a handful of sheep, and a few years ago he had showed a couple at the county fair last summer. The pale light of the full moon in the sky gave the place a vaguely sinister air for some reason she could not quite put her finger on, though. Molly suppressed a shudder when she started to jot down the time and date of the entry in her notebook. "Well, I just happened to look out the back window." Dan waved absently back toward the house as they approached the barn. "I think it was around 9 or so. Law and order was just starting anyways." He shrugged, sparing a glance at the woman, who was studiously taking down what he was saying while walking a pace or so behind him. "I saw a light like somebody with a flashlight or something back here by my barn, so I grabbed my piece and run them off." Molly arched an eyebrow. "Run them off how? Were they in a car or something?" she asked as she glanced around the yard. A look over her shoulder showed their footprints in the almost ankle-high grass. Her brow furrowed slightly when she moved a bit to her right and spotted a trail that looked like footprints or something in the dewy grass heading up the hill. Strange, Molly thought, the tip of her pen hovering millimeters above the surface of her notepad. It sure looked like somebody had gone across the field, but why? There was nothing but woods out there. "I don't think there was a car or nothing. I couldn't see because it's dark." Dan shrugged with a glance over his shoulder again then, as if anticipating the question, he added, "I was down in the basement after dinner, working on a bird feeder for my granddaughter's birthday in a couple of weeks." As they got closer to the barn, the quiet snuffling sounds of drowsing animals could be heard in the barn. Dan motioned toward the padlock hanging haphazardly from the latch and the pale marks where someone had ripped out the screws with a crowbar. Molly pulled a small flashlight from the carrier on her belt and flicked it on. "Did you touch anything, Mr. McLean?" she asked, with a slightly puzzled expression as she got a closer look at the damage. The air was tinged with that scent peculiar to barns with farm animals in them. A melange of sweat and hay and dung that hovers somewhere just between pleasant and disgusting. Upon closer inspection, she could make out where the suspect had gouged the paint on the wooden door while trying to get the crowbar into place under the latch. Curiouser and goddamn curiouser, Molly thought, her features pensive as she regarded the marks, then looked towards where she had seen the footprints. Naturally, they were invisible at this angle. "No more than I had to, officer," Dan said as he watched the cop look over the door. "I had to check on my animals, ma'am." He inclined his head toward the half-open barn door. She nodded and nudged the door open the rest of the way with the toe of one of her ankle boots. The first thing she noticed was that the gates to the handful of animal pens just inside hanging open on either side. A few sheep approached the steel bars and shoved their muzzles through the gaps, eager to meet the new stranger visiting them at this late hour. Dan flicked a switch, flooding the inside of the barn with pale yellow light from the halogen bulbs hanging from the ceiling. So Molly turned off her light and put it back. She bowed their displeasure at the disturbance as Dan showed Molly the empty animal pen. Molly cocked her head slightly as she examined the empty pen, then the latch on the one next to it. "No locks on these?" she asked as she reached over the top and scratched the sheep inside between the ears. The latches on the gates looked to be the sort that secured themselves when the long spring bolted on the inside of the door pulled it shut, though there was no way to secure the latch with a padlock. "Do you want to press charges, sir?" Molly asked as she straightened and rested her thumbs into the duty belt around her waist. "Hell yes, I want to press charges," Dan exclaimed with an angry gesture toward the empty pen. "The son of a bitch stole Dolly, my best sheep. I was going to show her at the fair in a couple of months." The farmer looked shamefaced for a moment. "Pardon my language." Molly smiled at the man and reached for the hand mic. "If you like, you can wait in the house, Mr. McLean. It's probably going to be a while," she said as she followed Mr. McLean out of the barn. The man agreed, promising to come back with the identification numbers tattooed into the stolen animal's upper lip for a report. She nodded thanks as she called dispatch, and after a few moments of back and forth, got a crime scene truck rolling in their direction. She rolled her eyes when Mabel, the volunteer running the call station that night, informed her that it would be at least an hour before the lab rats got there. The young policewoman sighed heavily and glanced at the grassy lawn a moment before heading back inside the barn. There didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary as she took a quick look around the barn. Why the hell would someone want to steal a damn sheep anyways? Molly wondered, absently scratching the back of her neck as she peered under the small tractor at the back of the barn. This was like some shit out of one of those old black and white John Wayne movies. Unless it was kids pulling a prank or something. That seemed to make the most sense given what information she had so far. This notion made an eyebrow creep up her forehead as she continued her search. Maybe I got lucky and one of the little bastards dropped his wallet or something, she thought with a wry grin. That sort of thing wasn't exactly likely, but stranger things had happened. Molly shook her head as she walked out of the barn. She was tempted to go follow the tracks into the dune and see what, though she might mess them up before the CSI techs got there. An odd thought occurred to her as she stepped out of the moonlight and looked around. The grass was just a bit higher than the hem of her uniform slacks, which was pretty overgrown for somebody's backyard. Maybe Mr. McLean had just let the mowing go for a while? Molly chewed her bottom lip as she contemplated this for a few moments and then started searching the grass with her flashlight. The more she thought about the situation, the more the little hairs on her arms and the back of her neck stood on end for some reason she couldn't quite figure out. At long last, the midnight blue cargo van with the county seal on the front doors trundled up the road, and Mr. McLean let them drive down to the barn. Molly stood off to the side while the lab rats snapped their photos and dusted for prints. Mr. McLean let the lab techs fingerprint him, saving the forensic team the time it would take to go down to the county records office and pull his fingerprint card from his pistol permit. Molly went over his statement one last time while the man wiped the ink from the pads of his fingers with the cleansing cloth. "One last thing," Molly said as the man started toward the back of the house. She cringed internally when she realized that she sounded like the detective from that TV show. "How long has it been since you cut the grass?" Molly inclined her head towards the ground and smiled somewhat awkwardly. The man looked puzzled for a moment or two. I think it's been about a week or so." "Why?" Dan asked in return. He started to scratch the side of his neck, then stopped himself, remembering the residue of ink still on his fingers. It looked like the crime scene guys were about finished up, though they seemed to be taking their time packing their things away and getting back in the van. He eyed the two men in jeans and windbreakers behind the policewoman with a hint of suspicion when they seemed to pause and look in his direction. "No reason, really, just sort of curious," Molly said, flashing a small smile at the man. "Have a good night, Mr. McLean. I'll make sure things are locked up before I leave." The man gave her a curt wave and headed back towards the house, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Molly frowned slightly after the man, then turned and approached the CSI technicians. "Anything you can tell me right away?" she asked hopefully. The two men looked at each other, then back at her as they finished packing up their gear. "Not much right away," one of them said, a stout fellow with dark hair and a well-trimmed beard. Looks like somebody busted the lock off with a crowbar. Find us something to match the marks against, and that'll be something. Lots of fingerprints, but that might be the owner's. The tech shrugged and looked Molly up and down after putting what looked like a huge tackle box in the back of the van. Don't worry, if there's anything out of the ordinary, we'll be in touch. Well, you can reach me here, Molly said as she reached into her breast pocket and produced a bleached white business card with the number of the sheriff's office and her desk extension printed on it. Well, not quite her desk. She shared a desk with one of the other officers that worked the day shift, though she had her own voicemail and a few drawers on one side of the desk. She walked back to the cruiser, which was still parked in McLean's driveway, and she made a mental note to call the local vet's offices just before she clocked out for the morning. They'd be a big help if whoever stole the sheep tried to bring them in for a checkup or whatever one did with sheep. Molly frowned slightly and nodded to herself as she climbed into the cruiser. It seemed like the best she could do for right now under the circumstances. Around the same time as the crime scene investigators were arriving at the McLean's house, Joe Dawson was finishing up locking up the gas and gulp for the night. The night's receipts were tallied, the levels of the gas in the bunkers outside measured. Scrub the shitter and mop the floor, he reminded himself as he headed for the storeroom and back where the cleaning supplies were kept. It took the better part of 15 or 20 minutes before he had finally blasted the piss stains off the toilet and sprayed everything down with disinfectant. When that was done, he put the toilet brush and bowl cleaner back, then rolled the mop and bucket over to the faucet. He started filling the mop bucket up and in the slop room after adding a liberal amount of pungent-smelling green cleanser as the water pissed into the bucket. And fuck my life, Joe thought as he slapped the sodden mop down on the tile floor and started scrubbing at a particularly stubborn spot of gunk. He let out a groan when he realized it was a piece of chewing gum that somebody had thoughtfully stomped into the tile at some point during the day. Motherfucker, Joe spat, licking his lips when a gob of saliva threatened to fall onto the floor. So frustrated and angry he was actually sort of dizzy, he slammed the mop into the bucket and stalked towards the storage room in search of the scraper. Once he found the damn thing, he got down on his knees on the damp floor, muttering a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. After what felt like half an hour of scraping and cussing, the chunk of blackened gum finally came free. Joe walked over and flicked it into the trash can. Finally. Fuck, Joe muttered under his breath inside as he locked the doors, then turned and started walking down Fulton Street with his hands stuffed dejectedly into his pockets. On top of everything else, he was out of cigarettes, and he hadn't thought to accidentally slip a pack into his pocket before closing time. It sounded like something scraped against the blacktop behind him, and Joe glanced over his shoulder, scowling at the noise. God damn, and I ain't even drunk yet, Joe thought with mild frustration as he started walking again. There was the better part of a 30-pack left in the fridge, which would put the right spin on things until he got to go to work again tomorrow night. I wonder if Molly's going to come by again tomorrow, he thought. The thought put a little extra spring in the man's step as he continued on his way, picturing her cute little behind when she turned and hurried out of the door. He walked a little ways down the road with his eyes closed, picturing Molly in that little bikini that the model in the car magazine had been wearing, arching her back and making bedroom eyes at him. Hey, what the fuck? Joe ejaculated when he ran into something that he almost took to be a tree trunk at first. Though, how did a tree trunk get in the middle of the road, and why did it smell like... Oh, holy shit. Joe's voice was breathy as a frightened girl's as he found himself staring into a form blacker than the night. A pale face grinned down at him, revealing a mouthful of long needle teeth below pale yellow eyes that vaguely shone animal-like in the moonlight. Those eyes bore into his own like laser drills. Oh God, Joe mewled, vaguely aware of hot liquid rolling down the leg of his jeans. God, please. Hands with long, spindly fingers ending in, for lack of a better term, talons rested on his shoulder. Gah. Joe's eyes rolled wildly in their sockets, his head lolling as saliva ran freely down his chin. Yes, I am your god now.
That's horrible.
It comes into play later.
Carry on, Robert.
The stolen sheep had me like dying. Why a sheep?
Well, now you got somebody wanting to read your book.
For sure, me too.
Yeah, that was great. You got me going there at the end, man.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, really good. All right. Okay, everybody, next we're going to have WD Lady. She's known on Minds as Badass Row, and she has a pre-recorded video, but we want to talk to her a little bit because we've been friends for a long time, and I'm so happy to see that I have you here in the group. We don't see each other right now, but I did see your gorgeous mask.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we've known each other for a long time, haven't we? 3 years, I think.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, we almost every day we talk. So,
oh yeah, we chat, and I'm just really honored. I'm really happy that you guys invited me because I just feel honored, really.
Aw. Well, we're honored to have you because I did read some of Eric Mar's, but I've read a lot of yours right on Minds. Remember when you had them and you were saying anybody that wants to read them and comment? I did that for like.
Oh yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Yeah,
I'm so grateful. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun when you used to do those contests and things. But we go way back, so we invited you, and I'm glad to have you here. And it's not going to be your live reading, but we're going to add you in. We're going to put your link in so that you can show your stuff.
Thank
and
you.
We're so sorry we couldn't have Eric Mar today. Everybody that was expecting him, we're so sorry we couldn't have Eric Mar. But we do have you, and we're going to segue into your video later. But would you like to talk a little bit about what... anything about your stories? I know you do a lot.
Yes.
You want to tell us a little bit.
Well, I've been writing for many years now, at least about like 15, 16 years, and I've always wanted to be a writer. I was into film production, and it was I went to I think I did mention I lived in California. I was trying to be a production assistant, and things didn't work out, but it happens. And then I had to move back home, but it eventually worked out, and I started writing more. And I think I published Nightmarish Reality in 2012. And I think I also have the sequel I published 2015. And I've been trying to finish off the trilogy. There's 4 books in the series, but it's been so hard because I'm always working. I did have some medical issues that I had to deal with first, so it just had a lot of health problems initially. So it's been kind of hard, and then of course the lockdowns and everything. But I just try the best I can, and just to survive.
Yeah, I know that feeling. You have an autoimmune disorder, and I do too. So
yes, I do. But the doctors, I've done all these tests, and they said it's normal, but I keep getting sick, and they can't explain why. So, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I've noticed a lot of the time that people that we invite who are readers, a lot of them have had a lot of physical issues. It's not just you. So don't feel like you're alone. I wish I could write like you guys do. And that's why we brought you on, because I've read yours. I've read Eric Mar's. I've read some of Robert's. I need to read more of Robert's. His is spooky. But I just wanted to show everybody what great artists we have here. And some of you call yourself authors, some are writers, but I've read it and I know your stuff is really good. And I'm just happy to have you here. Happy to hear your voice finally.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I'm just so happy that we are getting the chance to let you shine. So yours is pre-recorded. Everybody will know that. But we have your information here. And everybody that's listening, WD Lady is on Minds. She has books that you can purchase. Would you like to tell them where they can find your books?
They can find them on Amazon, on
And
Amazon.com. And it's just 2 books for right now, Nightmares Reality and then Nightmares Revelations. And hopefully this year, hopefully I'll publish the 3rd novel, which is Nightmares Reaction. And then I'm also trying to get back on another series that was halted last year, Flash Renegade. I was working on a graphic novel, and then my 2 artists they dropped the project, so I was kind of pretty much left to do things on my own. So hopefully, I'll probably do like a novel series on that one since the graphic novel didn't work out.
Yeah.
right, I remember when that happened. You were so upset that you couldn't get the art done.
Oh yeah, I was devastated, but things like that happen sometimes, and you just it's a risk. Everything we do is a risk, so I just try to think positive and just keep moving forward.
Go ahead and give your background to the story.
Okay, because it's a short story I wrote in college a couple years ago, and it's basically about initially when I wrote it, it wasn't supposed to be like a horror story, but it's about a man who basically is kind of like reminiscing on the past mistakes that he made and pretty much trying to put an end to whatever is haunting him. And it's just maybe like, I think it's like 9 pages. So it was just a short story I did in one of my classes, and it has a twist ending.
Ooh,
Cool.
so good. It's going to be.
I can't wait to hear it.
Lost. I fell in a muddy puddle. My face was covered with wet dirt and sweat. An evil presence that I couldn't see surrounded me. I came closer. The bushes rustled noisily. In my mind, I knew that this was it. What would be my fate? Rain poured heavily. Mist and fog veiled the swamp like a white sheet of paper. I was too young to die. I didn't want my life to end this way. Whatever was chasing me was approaching fast. Death would be here in a matter of minutes. I had no doubt about it. I wouldn't be able to escape it much longer once it saw me laying on the ground in defeat. I lifted my head and elevated myself into a comfortable sitting position. I sat Indian style on the soggy muck and glanced up at the black, starless sky. I couldn't even wish myself out of this one, not even a falling star for a loser who didn't see his life heading towards a dark tunnel. "Daddy!" a familiar voice echoed in my mind. Tears of joy swelled in my eyes. Droplets of rain were pouring down my face, washing the filth off my skin as if none of this ever happened. I didn't feel cold anymore. A ray of sunshine emerged from the branches of the trees. The rain slowly diminished from my sight and unconscious psyche. "Daddy, Daddy!" The voice sounded so close, almost right behind me. I used to be happy. I was handsome and clever. I was a powerful man back in my day with wealth and a family. Everyone knew who I was. Numerous people befriended me because of the riches I had. It felt wonderful. It was a drug that became so addictive. I had no control over my actions or even myself. I turned around with outstretched arms. "Jace, My 7-year-old son ran to me with loving arms and jumped right into my warm embrace, holding me tightly. Light was everywhere as I danced with him around a room with lavish rugs, wooden floorboards, table sets, and fine chinaware. There were bookshelves big and small, colorful pictures and paintings hung from every wall. Large white vases with roses and flowers had been neatly decorated to match the homey living room. The piano played softly in the background. The tune was soft and relaxing. I heard myself humming to it as a lullaby. Such expensive objects and knickknacks encircled me. I thought nothing could go wrong. My life was filled with bliss. What happened to me? Why did it all go away? I remembered it now. A small garden snake slithered in the backyard near the swimming pool. "We have to talk," Rihanna said with glaring jade eyes that burned like fire. Her long and brown wavy hair was soaked. She must have just gotten out of the shower. She was fully dressed in jeans and a pink tank top. Her eyebrows were puckered and her mouth was a frown. I had no idea what to expect. "Why? What's wrong, Rhea?" I asked, putting down my son. "Don't involve Jance in this," she whispered. I kneeled down and faced my boy. "Go to your room, all right?" I said. "But why, Daddy?" Jace asked, gripping onto my shirt with his tiny bronze hand, not wanting to let go. His black eyes seemed concerned. His pupils were glowing as if a spotlight was right over him. He had his adorable pajamas on with the Power Rangers. It was his favorite show. "Everything will be okay. Just do what Daddy says." I gently nudged him back with my hand. Jace was a good boy, and he would stay in his room for hours, watching TV if I hadn't called him down for breakfast. When Jace left the room, Rihanna stepped forward and presented a letter to me. Her hand was shaken in pure rage and anguish. "So you have a mistress?" she asked. "Rhea, it's not what it looks like," I tried to explain. Why did I not see it coming? I was so stupid to trust you. Every day I waited for you to come home from your so-called business trip. And you do this to me? She crumpled the letter in her hand and threw it to the ground. I was going to tell you, but I said, "Yeah, I understand. I'm not good enough for you. Did you ever think about our son? What's going to happen to him? His life, his future. Did you once think about me? How I would feel?" Rihanna marched out of the living room and then upstairs. "Please, Rhea, let me explain," I called to her, following her to the master bedroom. Rihanna had her clothing already packed in a suitcase. She snatched the handle and yanked it, dragging the luggage along the carpet. "Rhea, please, it was just a one-night stand. It didn't mean anything to me," I pleaded. I heard the thud of the suitcase down the stairs every step of the way. I called my mother. She'll come by later and pick up Jace. Rihanna opened the front door. "I'm leaving you." She displayed no reaction to me whatsoever, nor did she hear my pleas. I was invisible to her as she left, and she never turned back. After the divorce, the cheerful smile that I had always brightened my day was gone. The light-hearted person Rihanna was before had now withered away, and so did the soft features of her skin. I cried quietly. Thunder boomed piercingly. The ground trembled as it crackled, with no remorse. I was going to die here, in a place that didn't know my name. Why wasn't I truthful with her? Why did I have to lie? "So, you're married?" said a woman with lilac eyes. She had short blonde hair that gently touched her shoulders. I traced her up and down. The scarlet dress this woman had flowed along her shaped curves. She called herself Scarlet for short, since she didn't want to tell me her real name. "No, I'm not. Would you like a drink of the finest champagne?" I said, sighing with relief. Luckily for me, I took off my wedding band just in the nick of time as I entered the ballroom. I was dressed in a black tuck suit and my hair was damp with gel. I extended my hand to her and led her to a nearby table where we could talk in peace. Good, 'cause I'm sick of drawing in the married guys. They're such dogs. Scarlett smirked evilly. She stuck out her forked tongue and made a hissing sound. Every business trip I had, I met a different woman and sometimes a cheap prostitute. It was the excitement that lured me toward the temptations of lust, of being wild and free where there were no rules and no boundaries. From then on, my life wasn't the same. I started gambling my money recklessly until I was flat out broke. The result was devastating. I was fired from my job, and once that took effect, I didn't have enough money for child support. It was as if all my problems had started off as a tiny rock that had fallen off a cliff. But now my troubles were a huge boulder knocking everything in its path. The IRS took my 50-bedroom mansion and every vehicle that I own, including my favorite silver Lexus and bright red Mustang. I borrowed money from my friends so I could find a small part-time job and make a living somewhere. It wasn't really what I considered living at all, and I soon turned to depression. For 2 years, I didn't see Jace. I received letters from my son that he was a pitcher in his little league team at West Oaks Elementary. There were piles of letters in the corner of my apartment room that I had never touched. Rihanna didn't have a problem with Jace writing letters to me, but she still couldn't handle talking over the phone with me. Jace would often call and I'd try to sound happy. I'd frequently come up with an excuse for why I wasn't at his school play or why I couldn't stay on the phone with him for long periods of time. Pull yourself together. Someone's firm hand was on my damp shoulder. The hand was dry and appeared to be unaffected by the thunderstorm. My best friend, David, took the small glass of liquor from my hand. It's not the end of the world. You need to go back to her and work this out. You have a kid to think about, he said. I can't look her straight in the face, I said, slurring my words. I was inside a smelly bar with hideous strangers and smoke from the filth of cigarettes. I came there every night, drinking constantly and wasting what little money I had for an icy beer or hard liquor. You need to be strong. Just look at yourself. You're a mess, David said. His eyes were bewildered, not only of confusion but also of fear that I scarcely imagined. I could hardly see him. His face was a blur to me. All I could hear was his deep voice. He was lecturing to me like I was a child. I had known David since I was in college. We were best buds and we both had a family and success. David was unlike me in many ways. Money wasn't everything to him, and he cherished his wife more than I did my own. He thought of himself as just an average person and not a wealthy millionaire, dressing in casual clothes and driving around in an old pickup truck. Who would have guessed by glimpsing at him that he was one of the richest men in the world? I don't care. I want to be alone, I said. I need you to get your act together, man. You need help, David said in desperation. She takes my kid. I don't want him. Take him. I clumsily fell off the stool and snickered as a fool that had no feet. My eyes were bloodshot. I hadn't slept for days. What's become of you? I don't even know you anymore. David raised his brow and shook his head. Just leave me. I don't need you. I shoved him away from me. David quickly surrendered and lifted his hand slightly in the air. I'm not going to fight you, he said, backing off. I don't need anyone, not even you, I said. You'll regret this. Someday you'll realize that your son will never forgive you for this. It was the last I heard him say before the door slammed shut. How truly right David was. I didn't realize it at that moment, but here I was, recalling those very same words. A dark shadow flashed across one of the large windows in an instant and disappeared. I saw it at the corner of my eye and almost choked. Its shape was abnormal, and it didn't appear to be human. No one could travel that fast from one window to the next without being noticed. I glanced around the barn. Everyone looked too miserable and wrapped up in their own problems to even care what I had just witnessed. I elevated myself and got on my hands and knees. My hands were plastered with swamp mud and grass. I pounded the ground with my fists, sobbing uncontrollably. I looked over and stared at the tiled floor beneath me. All the tiles were completely dry. Not a single botch of mud or raindrop was on them. This is where I tried to start over, a new life. I had bought an old used car and filled up the tank, ready to escape this hellhole. I attempted to get rid of the past, the sorrow, the memories of her. "So where are you going?" an elderly woman asked. Her voice was delicate and soft. I barely knew her, and yet I sensed that she knew me somewhat. I think her name was Inyu. She had greeted me at the door of the gas station. Inyu had spectacles over her sapphire eyes and gray curly hair. It was extremely short and thinning at the sides. "I don't know. Away from here," I said, watching her carefully put my items in a brown grocery bag. The Floridian temperature was scorching and humid. The entire station was deserted. I believed that I was the only customer for the day that Inyu had encountered. "You running away from something, stranger?" Inyu asked. I sighed. "Why would you think that?" I lifted the paper bag with both hands. "Your eyes, they seem so sad," she said. "I'm not sad," I lied through my teeth. "Just be careful where you go. There's sightings of unusual things in these parts." Inyu handed back my change and smiled at me weakly. I disregarded her and rushed out the glass door, gaining no knowledge from what she said. Back then, I was still an arrogant man. I didn't learn from my mistakes, apart from despair and hopelessness. I traveled in my beat-up Honda to no particular destination. The Honda used to have a golden color. In time, its coat peeled and chipped at every corner. How did it come to this? I jolted as a fierce roar exploded from within the swamp. The engine to my car started to smoke and rumble. I pulled over at the edge of the freeway and removed the key. Silence crept inside. I sat hoping to put an end to the misery. I rummaged around the grocery bag and got out of the car with a bottle of liquor in one hand. Might as well drink while I'm here, I thought to myself. I twisted the cap and guzzled every last drop. The liquor burned my throat as it went down. The night was chilly. I distinguished a few stars out. The sky was at its darkest. This was not a normal sky. It was pitch black. The moon was nowhere to be seen. I figured it was biased and would never beam on someone as selfish as me. For hours I ignored the pain, stumbling here and there recklessly. I was drunk, hardly knowing that gleaming yellow eyes were following me. They sparkled as fireflies, buzzing in circles in order to find their perfect mate. Large clawed feet stomped the ground, pacing close by. I was in my own world, seeing everything as an illusion. Nothing felt real. My senses were numb to the bone. I was bitter at everyone and everything, including how I treated myself. I tripped. My body rolled into a ditch. I thought my entire life was a joke. What did I actually live for? Was it just for me? Did I care for nothing? Light rain poured on me as I laid there for what felt like an eternity. I closed my eyes. The tree branches wobbled violently, and a sound bellowed from the depths of my very soul. I opened my eyes and struggled to rise. Its head was hidden in the shadows, its bumpy skin camouflaged well in the darkness. I fled, and it pursued me, growling on all fours. Mud splashed on my clothing. I wanted this beast to rip me to shreds. I couldn't go on living. I was meant to die. For what I did, I deserved it. Vivid memories raced through my head. Maybe if I had a second chance, I'd go back to the beginning. Yeah, I understand. I'm not good enough for you. Did you ever think about our son? What's going to happen to him? His life? His future? Did you once think about me? How I would feel? Rihanna marched out of the living room and upstairs. I'm sorry, Rhea. I didn't mean it. I never wanted to hurt you and Jace. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I love you. I just didn't appreciate you, and I'll admit it. I just want this to go away. I love both of you. I was only thinking about myself. I was so selfish, I whispered, begging for forgiveness. Don't involve Jace in this, she whispered. I kneeled down and hugged my boy. Jace, please forgive me. Your daddy did something he didn't mean to do. I'm so sorry that I lied to you and your mother. I'm sorry that I wasn't in your life, that I left you alone, I said. But why, Daddy? Jace asked. As I released him, he placed his warm hands on my face and gazed at me with those big eyes. I was stupid and conceited, and because I was afraid to admit the truth. I wasn't sure if he'd understand, but Jace was a smart boy, and I was glad that I told him the truth, instead of lying to him, deceiving myself that everything was perfect. David placed his hand on his forehead. What's become of you? I don't even know you anymore, he whispered in disbelief. David, please forgive me. I've always considered you a brother to me. I just never said it because I didn't believe I needed help. I thought I could do things on my own, solve my own problems. You've always supported me, and yet I've treated you like crap, I said, handing him the glass of forgetfulness. Your eyes, they seem so sad, Inu said. I've lost everything. I lost my wife, my son, and my close friend. It was my fault for losing them, I said. Inu grabbed my hand gently and gave back my change. We all make mistakes. We're only human after all. If you go back and ask them to forgive you, they'll forgive you, she said. Do it now before it's too late. Your past will come back to haunt you. Inu smiled and waved goodbye to me. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please forgive me, I yelled, glancing up at the night sky. It stopped raining. A breathing sound approached closer. Thick vapor sprayed over my shoulder. I turned around and faced it head on. Its spiky tail knocked down a tree. The head was that of a dragon, and its long neck extended a few feet above me. I saw its eyes blaze wildly. I sat there, waiting for it to strike at me any second. It blinked and lowered its massive head. I felt a wet tongue link the side of my cheek. Right before my very eyes, the dragon transformed into a black feline. It meowed constantly for attention and stroked against my leg with its body. The beast, which wasn't a beast at all, purred softly. I rubbed its smooth head. I guess you're lost too, eh? I never saw the beast again after that day.
Well, wasn't that a great production? What a talented lady. Super impressed by your multiple skills, WD lady. Now we move on to our next pre-recorded video. This one is from Robot, who is at Kirkpatty Cake on Minds. I haven't yet met Robot, but I'm hoping we'll be able to talk her into doing an interview with us now that we've been introduced to her work. Enjoy.
Hello everybody, my name is Ian Patty Cake. I'm an author and robot, and today I'm here to read you a spooktacular story for this spooktacular event. So thank you. Pull up your favorite snack, because we're about to get down with a little story I like to call The Carpenter. Scotty didn't know why he agreed to do this. He didn't like scary stories, and he didn't particularly like Carissa and her best friend Wendy either. However, his best friend Steph had insisted on exchanging scary stories with the girls during recess. Scotty was sure the only reason they met was so Steph could try to make the girls cry. Carissa cleared her throat and sat up straight. Once upon a time, there was a 4th grade teacher, Miss Goodlady, and she noticed that all of the boys in her class were like bozos or super stupid and just really mean, while all of the girls paid attention and helped each other and did homework together and... Oh, brother. Steph rolled his eyes. Shut your face, Stefan. It's my story and I can say whatever I want, Carissa said. And if I want boys to be stupid, it's basically real life. I mean, look at you. Just because it's your story doesn't mean that you get to say whatever stupid stuff you want, Steph said. It kinda does, Wendy said. Carissa pushed Steph back. Now shush your face and stop judging before you hear the end of it, okay? Just because you don't like me doesn't mean that it's not a good story. Steph chuckled, elbowing Scotty with a smirk. Carissa and Wendy shared an annoyed look before Carissa continued. So, the girls were helpful and the boys were stupid and getting stupider, like every second. Then, one day, one of the boys passed a note about one of the girls in class, and the teacher got a hold of the note. She looked at the boy who sent it and gave him a look that was so stern, it melted his face into a puddle on the floor. The other boys shook with fear, but punched each other's shoulders to look macho. Yeah, man, we're not afraid, they said. By the end of class, they were over what happened. So, in the next class, they started throwing paper balls everywhere, mostly at the girls, and one hit the teacher. The girls all said, "Oh my God," at the same time. The teacher was next to the boy that had hit her with the paper ball, and she stared at him, and they all thought that his face was going to melt off, except instead of his face being melted off, the teacher dropped her voice to the lowest, croakiest voice ever and said, "Girls, go to recess. Boys have detention and must stay here." Once all of the girls were outside, the teacher circled the boys. Gather round, get into the center of the room," she said. "Pull all of your desks together." They didn't want to bring their desks together or listen to the teacher, but they knew that they didn't have a choice. One said, "I'll put my desk wherever I want," and then put it where he was told. They waited for someone to stand up to the teacher and not move their desks, but everyone followed along. The teacher laughed a witchy laugh and said, "Ha ha ha ha, good boys," then left the classroom. She locked the door. The boys panicked. They tried to open the door even though they knew that it was locked because they were stupid. Then they tried to open the windows, but they didn't work either. The sun came through the windows and it started getting hotter and hotter. The boys in the circle looked at the boy who had his face melted off the day before and knew that their fate was coming. 1 week later, when the teacher came back, all of the boys were completely melted into skin puddles. She called the janitor to mop them up, and then the class was only girls and it was peaceful for the rest of forever. The end. "I told you that your story was going to be the lamest," Steph said. "It was not." Carissa hit the ground with her fists. "If you think that you can do better, prove it." Wendy leaned forward and poked Steph hard in the chest. "I will," he said, rubbing his chest. "Once upon a time, there was this guy who by day was making clothes and finding shirts that looked good on people, but by night he was like, I don't like people. I think I'm going to kill them all. Because during the day, a lot of them were mean, and when he brought them clothes, they were like, I don't like this outfit. You suck at this. Why is this even your job? You should kill yourself, you know? But really, those people were just in bad moods because they had bad families, or their dads wouldn't let them get a dog even though they promised to feed them and walk them and play with them every day. Even if they were 30 years old, their dads still wouldn't let them get a dog. And so in the dark, dark night of London, because that's where all of the crazies live, he would kill people. Like, if you went out on the streets after the sun went down, then you would die, because he thought that you were stupid for being out after dark, you know? So he would attack the stupid people that... That's really mean, Wendy interrupted. It's not like those people did anything like the boys in Wendy's story. They deserved to be killed. These people are probably going on dates, or they're out with their moms and stuff. He kind of kills people, Wendy. He obviously isn't a nice person. Steph pursed his lips again. He gave Wendy a look as if saying, if you interrupt me again, I'm gonna kick you. Just get it over with. I want to tell my story already. Wendy crossed her arms and looked away. Steph smiled and made the spookiest wiggly fingers that he could and continued. At night, he would close his shop and take his sewing scissors with him, and when he came across someone on the street, he would say, hello, and tell them that he was a clothing person and that he wanted to offer them some free styling advice, you know, and he would ask them. Steph dropped his voice to the lowest note that he could hit. Do you know what color would look best on you? And then they'd ask what color, and he'd say, red. And he'd laugh maniacally as he stabbed them in the back with his scissors until they were dead. And then he'd take them back to his shop and turn them into suits, and then he'd wear them. And that's why they called him the Carpenter. What? Wendy didn't miss a beat. They called him the what? The Carpenter, Steph said in his spooky voice. Carpenters make houses and dressers and stuff. Tailors make clothes and suits and socks and stuff, Wendy said. Her mouth was wide open with disbelief. How did you ever get into the 4th grade? Steph shook his head, a wide-mouthed expression on his face, and sat up straighter, turning his nose away. So? Doesn't mean that I can't name him the Carpenter. Yes, it does, because it doesn't make any sense and it's not scary, Wendy said. If you think that you can do better, then go ahead and try. Let's see you make up a good story. Steph snorted. He curled his fingers into the rubber gravel beneath him. Fine. This is how a real scary story goes. Wendy paused. Grinding her teeth, she looked away from her small audience. A light sweat coated her skin. We're waiting. Shut up, Steph. Anticipation is like half of a scary story. Don't you know that? Wendy said. Why would I know that? Steph stuttered, but rolled his eyes. Just tell the story. Wendy exhaled. Her voice dropped when she started. Once upon a time, there was this little girl who lived in a big house with her uncle, aunt, and 4 cousins. Her parents had died in some freak car accident when she was really little, and so she was shipped away to live with her closest relatives. Now, closest didn't mean that they liked her. In fact, her aunt and uncle and 4 cousins were super hateful. Like, it didn't matter how pretty she dressed up. They called her ugly like a pig wearing lipstick. Her cousins would rip her clothes until all she had was rags, and no one liked her, and they told her that she should kill herself. And on Christmas, they didn't even let her hang up a stocking. Not on the chimney, not on a stair guardrail, not even in the attic where she lived. Yawn, Steph said. He covered his mouth, stifling a yawn as he pretended to fall asleep. This is so boring and generic. I'm not done yet. Wendy shoved Steph back. Just sit there and be quiet or you'll be sorry, her uncle said to her when she asked about joining them for Christmas Eve supper. Then she made a terrible mistake. She made the mistake of asking him why she couldn't have any. He was struck with uncontrollable rage and shoved her down the stairs. Her neck cracked and she died. Nobody cried. They didn't give her a funeral or wish her to heaven. Instead, they just took her body and threw it into the lake behind the house. The girl became a ghost. She was so upset because they never accepted her. So, that night, when all of them went to sleep, it wasn't Santa that came down the chimney. It was her. She started out by lighting the fireplace and throwing all of the presents and the tree into it. The first floor of the house caught fire and burnt up fast. Then she looked for sheets and rope or anything that she could tie people up with. Then, one by one, she chased each of them into the attic and hung them on the support beams. She watched as each of her cousins squirmed and bounced around, choking until they died. She saved her uncle for last, and when she finally led him up to the attic, she laughed when he screamed and cried at seeing his dead family. She watched him beg for his life and said, "Just sit there and be quiet, or you'll be sorry," with the biggest smile on her face. Somebody called the police that night. No one knows who, 'cause her aunt, uncle, and 4 cousins didn't have any neighbors for miles. When the police arrived, they found all of the family in the attic, hanging cold and dead with the word naughty written across their foreheads, their mouths sewn shut into a frown, and their stomachs were full of water. The police thought this meant someone had drowned them first, so they searched the lake for more evidence. They found the little girl's clothes, but they couldn't find her body. She was just gone. Wendy rose an eyebrow and a grin spread across her face. They say if you're really naughty for a year on Christmas, you won't be visited by Santa giving you coal, but this little girl giving you death instead. I'm actually surprised she hasn't visited you yet, Steph. Wendy stuck her tongue out at him as she cocked her head to the side. And that is how you tell a scary story. Not with a freaking tailor named the Carpenter. No, it didn't make sense. How come no one noticed that she was gone? Steph asked. Because no one cared about her. Duh, Wendy said. Somebody would have noticed, and how did she even hang people? She was a little girl. She couldn't lift them, Steph said. Because she's a ghost. She can do anything she wants, and that includes haunting you if you don't stop mocking her, Wendy said. I'd like to see her try, Steph snorted. Whatever. I don't have to explain anything to you. Mine was just better than yours, and you know it. Mine was better, Steph laughed. I want to hear Scotty tell a story, Carissa said. Both Steph and Wendy looked at Carissa. Wendy's face said that she thought her friend was crazy before a wicked grin took over. I bet Scotty tells the worst story, Wendy laughed. Are you joking? Scotty can tell the scariest scary story of us all. Steph prodded his best friend with his elbow. Right, Scott? I guess I can try. His heart raced. There was something scarier than scary stories. Telling stories to other people, exposing yourself. Scotty cleared his throat. Can I have a second? His voice cracked. Sure, Carissa said. Take 20, Wendy snorted. Scotty didn't put much thought into the mocking laugh that Wendy gave. He already knew he wasn't creative. Steph had always been the creative one between the two of them. He told stories, and Scotty was happy to listen. He came up with the games and the jokes. To Scotty, Steph was, and always would be, a much more interesting person than him. Scotty sunk somewhere into his thoughts, somewhere he didn't like being. There was this little box he liked to keep in the back of his head. It was marked with a clear red label that said, Fear and do not open, and that box moved all on its own, bringing itself to the front of his mind on a regular basis. Scotty hated reaching into it. He hated when the lid popped off and something snuck out into his dreams. The box often moved at night, but it also moved frequently in crowded public places. It would rattle, growl, twitch, howl, and the second that he looked away and back, the top of the box would be open and his fears were no longer contained in his mind, but mingled in his reality. He'd hear it all around. The shadows from his nightlight would move and swirl around him like vultures waiting to eat his sleeping body. Scotty swallowed a lump in his throat and attempted to steady his voice. I cut himself off, hearing the crack when his voice tightened. I just don't think I can do this. He cleared his throat and settled back. He closed his eyes, focusing. A chill went through him. Are you okay, Scotty? Steph said. Look at him. He's so scared he's going to pee himself. Again, Wendy laughed. Shut up, Wendy. Scotty's fine, Steph said, offering the girl a glance for only a second. Right? He looked at his best friend. Scotty took a deep breath. His lips trembled. He didn't know what he was going to sound like when he finally spoke, but he knew that he had to. She didn't notice it at first. No one did. But it was all the little changes that were a warning of a monster. Maybe she was a little bit more tired than normal. Or maybe she had a little bit of a cough. Sometimes her head would start to hurt when it didn't normally hurt. And then her cough always sounded like she was sick. And then her tissues would have spots of red in them. And she had a hard time eating things. The beast was filling her insides. Her throat was swollen, and sometimes even drinking water was hard. She stopped being able to do the chores as much as she used to. Vacuuming the house took 2 or 3 times as long because she had to stop and sit down. She was dizzy, she was sweaty, she was too hot to keep going. And then she got really skinny. Everyone around her thought that it was because she wasn't eating much, swollen throat. But the monster was eating her weight. It was eating everything from the inside. The changes weren't noticeable every day, but every week she had trouble doing the same things until she couldn't get out of bed anymore. Her head hurt too much. She didn't have the energy. Somewhere something hurt. The family took her to the monster hunter, who said that the monster inside of her was eating her alive. They said that they could zap it, maybe cut it out, but it might hurt her, might kill her. She went to the monster hunters all the time to see if there was anything that they could do about the creature, but then finally the creature became so big that she couldn't leave the monster hunter's house anymore. She couldn't leave the white sheets in the white bed, where the wires poked into her arms to feed the monster something that would hopefully make it stop eating her. The monster hunter didn't know how to stop the monster. No monster hunter had ever figured out how to stop the monster, and the best answer that they had for ending the monster was to poison the monster's food supply. Oh my God. But isn't that the girl? Carissa said. Yeah. Scotty swallowed hard, lowering his head. They didn't make her do it, but they said that they could try to give it just enough poison so that it would die, but she wouldn't. She wanted to go home. She missed her family, and they missed her, but she was in pain. It was hard to tell if she was getting better from the traps set for the monsters. While he got weaker, so did she. They tried to catch the monster so they could pull it out of her and so that she could return home, but one night, on the last night that she would be alive, the monster fought the monster hunters desperately. It buried its claws into her insides, her heart, her lungs, her everything. It had spread so much inside of her that it had become her insides. And when it died, it took her with it. But the worst thing is, the monster isn't gone. It's not dead. You can't kill it with poison. You can't kill it with zaps. You can't cut it out. That monster just, it looks for a new home. It has a home in lots of people at once, and it eats all of them at the same time. You see this when you go to the monster hunter. When you see the people in the chairs setting the traps in their bodies to try and trick the monster out. Maybe the monster will leave for a little while. Maybe it'll leave forever. But when it gets inside of your body, it doesn't like to go anywhere. Even when it leaves, it'll leave a piece of itself to come back to and grow and take over again. And the only thing this monster wants is to consume. Take everything until it's gone. It's not happy. And it won't be happy until it can eat everything and everyone, and there's nothing left for it to eat anymore. Everyone looked at their feet. The school bell rang. Wendy stood up and brushed her skirt off. We better go inside to class. Sorry about your mom, Scotty, Carissa said. She reached over to place her hand on his. Wendy glanced over Scotty, then Steph, then turned out of the box they sat in and left. Carissa followed her. Scotty picked up a couple pieces of rubber playground tablets and tugged them apart in his fingers. Tears dripped down his cheeks and wetted the ground at his feet. Monsters are real, Scotty muttered. And that's the scariest thing. And you and me together? Steph picked up Scotty's hand. We'll beat every one of them. Scare them all away so they can't take any more. Steph's smile was contagious and brought a soft smile to Scotty's face. The two bumped shoulders and walked back to class. There's no way that the monster would come back after they run into the carpenter, Steph. Right? That guy is nuts. The end. Thank you for listening.
So today when I was recording, I told everybody that it would be fine to record things all out of position and I would just edit them back in together. But no, I was wrong. It's not fine. It was, in fact, like they said, it was going to be very, very difficult. Yes, it was very difficult. So you've got all these sort of little intermissions by me instead of the ones that we did together as a group. So sorry about that. Next time we'll improve. This next one up is me reading the first chapter of the story that my mom wrote in a book about the Boer War in South Africa, based loosely on her own parents. Her father was a German and her mom was a British woman, and they made this unlikely alliance. And yeah, there's my mom, and then my mom, being Afrikaner, then married my father, who was British. So we have a lot of this crossover of different nations in our family. This is the preface and the first chapter. I hope you like it. Preface. The Boer War was a different war for many reasons. Seldom has a war been waged with the hot patriotism displayed by the Boers. It was an intensely personal war, with the David and Goliath appeal seldom seen in warfare, and one that scarred the soul of many combatants, with the effects lasting often to this very day. The Boer republics neither maintained nor supported a national army. They were just militia or commandos under their commando leader. The Boers from the republics of the Suid-Afrikaanse Republiek, the ZAR, and the Orange Free State, OFS, were notified by the commando law to hold themselves ready for active service at the shortest possible notice. Every burgher between the age of 16 and 60 had to be ready to fight for his country at any moment. He was to provide himself with a horse, saddle and bridle, rifle with 30 cartridges, and provisions for 8 days. All without pay, just for the love of their country and determination to protect it. There was no military medical service to support them. In the British Army the situation was different, because a regimental medical officer, RMO, was allocated to each brigade. He was a medical surgeon, but his duties were more than that. He handled the health care of all the men in his unit. He had 16 regimental stretcher bearers to help and all the medical equipment he needed. Each brigade had its field hospital. In an unfortunate development, the post of the sanitary officer was made redundant during the Boer War, and everyone paid the price, as we shall see as the story unfolds. When war broke out, all European countries and the United States of America declared neutrality. Many people of the countries, however, were often not neutral and formed Boer relief committees and organizations such as the National Red Cross societies. The International Red Cross asked if help was required, and the British refused, but the two Boer republics accepted and received help from several National Red Cross societies, including German, Netherlands, French, Russian, and Scandinavian societies. Official figures of the typhoid epidemic reveal that of the British force of 556,653 men who served in the Anglo-Boer War, 57,684 contracted typhoid, 8,225 of whom died, while 7,582 were killed in action. As had been the experience in America in the Civil War, the disease was found to occur in large stationary camps. Lost. The young woman, a girl really, for she would not be 17 for another few days, was running away from the horror that was her life. She had scrounged 2 canteens of water last night from the families in the laager and was ready for a long walk. It was about 15 miles from the laager on the Paardeberg Drift to the small settlement at Jacobsdal to the southwest. She thought that she would make it in one day if all went well. But it did not go well at all. Before she had even left the laager, the barrage began again. It was the 9th day of artillery fire from the British guns of General Roberts. It was too much for her. She heard the screams of the wounded men mingle with those of the wounded animals, above the sound of the guns and the exploding shells. Earth and debris fell all around her as she threw herself flat onto the ground. She lay with her arms over her head for a few minutes, and then came a lull in the firing. She leapt to her feet and ran as fast as she could. and then once more threw herself onto the ground, this time in the shelter of an old tree. Pitiful cover that it was. At least it protected her from some of the shrapnel flying from the explosion. Bits of metal, bits of wood from wagons, bits which she shuddered to recognize as bloody remains of animals. At least she hoped they were from animals, and not from the Boer families in the laager. She lay on the ground, at her wits' end, as her tormented mind went over the events of the last few months of her life. Why had she not listened to her father when he told her that Harvey was an unsuitable man for a husband? Why had she married him and run off from her home in the South African Republic, thinking it was such an adventure to join Cronje's men in the Orange Free State, to drive the bloody British back over the sea to where they belonged? Why, when her young husband had been killed early in the artillery barrage, had she not left then? Why had she not left when their wagon had been destroyed by a shell on the 5th day of the battle? Why? Now she was all alone. No family, no friends, no belongings. Alone on the Orange Free State veldt, not knowing what to do. The only thing she was sure of was that she had to get out of this terrible battle. Oh, the guns! Would they ever stop? They would, and they did the next day, but she did not know that. The next day, the 10th day, his morale shattered by the barrage, and, against the wishes of his commandos, the Boer commandant, General Cronje, surrendered. The British had killed or wounded 350 of his men, and they took 4,019 prisoners. She stumbled back towards the laager, pulling her shawl tightly round her shoulders. She realized her original plan would not work, and that she would never make it through the battlefield. She did not know what to do. The noise, the destruction, the blood, and the dead bodies of her people, the dead bodies and the guts of the animals, were all just too much for her. If only she could dig a hole in the ground and hide. Eventually she could bear it no longer. She leapt to her feet and ran, which way she knew not. She ran and fell, got up, ran, tripped, and fell again, and as she got up this time, a stray shell landed nearby. Some shrapnel, its momentum dissipated somewhat by distance, struck her on the side of her head. She fell senseless to the ground. She awoke to the stench and the moans of the sick and dying all around her. It was dark. She hurt everywhere, but mostly in her head. The pain was terrible, more than she had ever experienced. She realized that she'd reached the makeshift hospital that the Boer supporters of Cronje had dug out of the riverbank. She struggled to her feet, but fell immediately and passed out again. The next time she awoke it was daylight, and she heard a cart and voices speaking in English. Those Boers left a lot of dead and wounded behind when they fled the laager. Here's another one, dead it looks like. Give me a hand to toss it in the cart. She tried to move, but she could not. As the men picked her up to throw her body into the cart, she screamed in pain. They dropped her, startled, and she groaned again. Well then, I guess she's not dead. I suppose we'd better take her to the hospital in Jacobstal. She's not one of ours, that's for certain. She's just a little Boer girl. We'll give her to the Germans there, if she survives the trip, that is. They can have the pleasure of fixing her up. The two men picked her up and put her in the cart. Not too gently, but not too roughly either, accustomed as they were to seeing and handling the dead and dying on the battlefield. She was just another casualty. Rebel, I think it's your turn now. Have you got a story for us?
Yeah, I'm going to tell a real story. Mine's going to be real life. And I thought it would be a good counterbalance because I knew we're basing everything on like Halloween and everything. My story was a real life situation that happened. I had a near-death experience, and I put it on Minds before, but I don't think I fleshed it out as well. So I'll tell the story and make it have a happy ending. We'll put mine at the end. But when I was pregnant with my son, Justin, who's now 39 years old, this was 1982, he was due on the 31st of January. And on the 31st, in the middle of the evening, I started having labor pains, and I knew it was going to be time to go to the hospital. So I got in the shower. When I got in the shower, I noticed that I was having the clear fluid, should be clear, that comes out when your water breaks. It was green. So I was in a rush to get to the hospital. We got to the hospital. The doctors were freaking out because he was in distress and we were having all kinds of difficulties. So they decided that they were going to put me on a Pitocin drip. And I don't know if people know what Pitocin is. It's a much more potent version of what we have in our own body called oxytocin. Mm-hmm. So they put me on this drip for, it was about 8 to 12 hours. I'm not sure exactly anymore, but It was getting to the point, it was getting me dilated, but then it was stopping. It wasn't working anymore. And they were starting to panic then. It was a small Navy hospital. There was nobody there on call for any kind of surgery. So my doctor was like, what are we going to do? They gave me even more. And what ended up happening, when I started going to push, I had what they call placenta abruptio. They didn't know it ahead of time, but my placenta was attached to my cervix. So when I started to have the cramping and the contractions, it was causing bleeding. And they recognized the bleeding, but they thought they were going to be all right. And they gave me this one last push right into the IV. Oh the pain was horrendous. So all of a sudden, they were rushing me into the labor and delivery room. And they were saying, we have to get this baby out. He was in distress. He had the cord wrapped around his neck twice. So we were in this panic. And the blood was controllable. But as soon as we got him delivered, I bled out. And I could feel it going on the floor. I could hear it. And then all of a sudden, boom, I was out of my body. It was the most scary moment in my life. I thought I was dead. And I think I probably was. I had no blood hardly left in my body. They were trying to keep me alive. And in this whole time, I just went poof out of my body. And all of a sudden, I was looking down. And I could see everything in the room. I could see the doctors. I could see the nurse. I could see my husband. But I wasn't in my body. And I'm like, what the? Mm-hmm. It was the most... Well, before I could even get adjusted to that, everything went black. And it was like feeling it, like you're in a cave with no light. That's what it felt like. But then all of a sudden, it was like I was rushing, like you're in a subway car, but there was nothing there, but it was like rushing along. And it then started getting lighter. And I looked, and at the end of this, I can't call it anything else but a tunnel, there was this really bright light. And I knew I hadn't ever heard of near-death experiences at that time. So I didn't know what was going on. And I just kept rushing and rushing and rushing toward this light. And then, boom, all of a sudden, again, I'm in this different place. And I look around, and how can you be looking when you don't have eyes? It's just so weird. But I could feel that I had some kind of body. And I looked off, and on the left of me, there was this, oh my God, I don't even know if I can describe it. But it was a bright, I called it a light being at the time. It was just like nothing but light. But I could see a shape in the light. And it was... It looked like there was a sash or something on his, it was a hymn, definitely a hymn. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it just splashed into my head, this is Jesus. But he never said he was Jesus. So I'm really not sure. But he said, I want to show you something. And where am I? And he said, just come with me. So I looked, and I was instantly somewhere else. And I was looking across a river, and it was a river, definitely a river. And then there was like a shoreline on the other side. And I couldn't make out the shoreline. It was like covered in mist. So it was like he was bringing me closer and closer. And then I could see these faces. I didn't know who most of them were, but I saw a couple. I was like, I think I might know that person. But I really wasn't sure. They were people, I think, that had died before that were in heaven. At the time, I was just so lost, I didn't know what to think. And then I heard someone on that other side say, I have a grandson. And I was thinking, wow, this is just getting weird. You know, what? But I remembered the voice. And then this being, either an angel or Jesus, looked at me and he said, this is where you'll come back. But it's not your time. You have to go back and raise your son. I didn't even know I had a boy yet. All I knew was something had happened, and here I am in this weird place. So the minute that he said that, he said, you have to go back and raise your son. All of a sudden, I went from this beautiful, pain-free place of light and warmth. I didn't even want to leave. No, I don't want to go back. And I remember that for a second, thinking, I want to stay here. I didn't have a choice. All of a sudden, it was like slam. I was back into this body that was hurting, and it was just horrendous. And then the very second later, I heard my husband saying, it's a boy, it's a boy. I already knew it was a boy, but I didn't know, you know what I mean? It was just so weird. Yeah. So I went home after this. I didn't tell anybody right away. I thought, man, this is just crazy. You know, I'm losing my mind. So I got home and I told my husband after we finally got home with my son, who ended up in NICU for about 6 hours, by the way. But we did both recover. We got home and I told my husband, I finally had to tell him, something really weird happened. You're not going to believe this. And he said, what? So I told him everything that had happened. He went into his closet and he had sermons from his father. His father was a Lutheran minister. He dug this sermon out and he had a tape that went with it. He put the tape in a cassette player, and it was his dad telling his near-death experience that he had had, and his dad had already died at that point, so I had never heard this tape. And it was his dad talking about what happened with his near-death experience where he left his body. And I just sat there like, oh my God. And my husband said, what's wrong? And I said, I've heard that voice. He said, you can't, he's dead. I said, I'm telling you, just at the moment that my son was born, I heard your dad saying, thank you for a grandson. And he was like, oh God, you gotta be kidding me. So I really felt this was way early, and I started finding books about this, and I found out that near-death experiences weren't all that rare. Then a couple of years later, I think it was about 8 years later, my husband's mother died. But before she died, she had a near-death experience too. And hers was, she saw Jesus and he said, you're not going to have to suffer much longer. So out of that family, there was 2 near-death experiences, and both of them bracketing mine. But if you want to talk about something that feels like horror and turns into something good, I can't think of a better story than that one. So that's my version of a spooky story.
That must have been amazingly spooky to have to live through that.
It was extremely spooky. I don't know if I don't even think I got it across to you how strange that felt when I listened to that tape. And I could hear that voice coming through that tape, and I had just heard it a couple of days before. And his dad was dead for 1.5 years before we even met.
Wow, that's incredible.
Very incredible. And I've told it before, but it's not the same when you write it as when you tell it. I hope that comes across, that gets you the little bit of the spooky feeling, because it was, at the same time, the most scary thing that ever happened to me. but probably the most momentous thing that ever happened to me, because I'm not scared of death anymore. Yeah, if I died tomorrow, the only thing I worry about is the pain. But it was something that's just beyond, I talk about. It was horrific, really. But then the ending was worth it, because I have a 39-year-old son now. We didn't even think either one of us was going to survive at the time.
Yeah.
So that's my story.
That is a good story. That's a good story.
Yes,
that's
it
a
is.
really good story. Yes.
Thank you.
Well, it's weird that you mentioned the like the stream with the the mist and everything like that. Because I'm not a Christian. My version of the afterlife looks different. It looks different than yours. We'll say that much.
You had a near-death experience too?
Well, no. It's weird that you mention it, because that particular visual thing, because probably I think about maybe 10 years ago now or something like that. My granddad on my father's side died of cancer, and I had just missed making it to, because I was at work when he really started going downhill, and I had just missed making it to his bedside before he passed. But it's weird that you meant, because probably, I think it, like either that night or the night after that, I actually had a dream, of, there was the, like you mentioned, the river and mist, and I'm like, I just knew that was the river Styx. I was looking at it, and through the fog on the other side, I could hear my grandfather, and he just said, "It's okay. It's okay."
Wow.
That is amazing. And yours was a dream.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't think of the river Styx at the time, but I did think about it later. But you know what? I grew up Christian, so it's a little different. Yeah. I grew up in a southern. Yeah, so I was thinking it was the River Jordan. But it didn't look anything like Israel. It was. Did yours have a lot of trees? Like it was.
I couldn't see. There was too.
Just too much mist.
It was like it felt like about a 5-minute dream, if that, and it was too foggy. All I could, I was just looking up, across the, into the fog on the other side, because there was a lot of fog.
You couldn't make anything out really clear.
Yeah, I couldn't. I could see. I could see the river, and I could see, ahead of me, but I couldn't see much beyond that.
Isn't that amazing? I think there's some common elements that everybody has, no matter what your background is. Because I've heard other people, after I had mine, mention that same thing, that there was a river and mist. And now you just say that yours was a dream, but you were in contact because your grandpa said it was okay. That is just, ooh, that gives me the chills too.
Or, I've got another one too that, it's really kind of creepy. It's creepy, but it's a good story, because this actually, happened to me. But, I used to work, I mentioned in the interview before, I used to work as a security guard in a city near where I live. And I primarily worked the night shift. But, I'm driving down the highway and just kind of zoning out a little bit, dude, because it was, I'm driving to work at like 11 o'clock at night. And I was kind of zoning out a little bit just because, it's late and I'm driving, and there's this one particular spot along my route that I'd have to take that you have to be careful because, there's a long stretch of 2-lane highway with an on-ramp that joins up coming behind you. And you have to be careful because kids like to street race down the straight stretch of highway, because it's about a quarter mile exactly. So they just come ripping down this on-ramp.
Right.
And I'm driving to work and I'm just kind of zoning out. And all of a sudden I hear an old Army buddy of mine who, like it sounded like he was literally like he was sitting in my passenger seat.
Wow.
And he goes, I just hear him, he just goes, slow down. And so it snaps me out of it. And I'm just shocked. So I let off the gas. And just as I let off the gas and start slowing down a little bit, this one of those little freaking it's like a Nissan or something, one of those little souped up rice burner cars comes, ripping down that off ramp. And if I didn't slow down at that exact moment, this guy would have gone right through me.
Wow, that's amazing too. I didn't have any more near-death experiences, but I think this is another one that would fit into, and I know some of you've heard this one before, but after my mom died, I was sitting out on the front porch and I was looking up in the sky and I saw this, I don't think it was an eagle, I think it was a red-tailed hawk, but it was circling the house. And I wasn't having any weird experiences or anything, except for the fact that I felt like that was my mom. Like you were saying with your grandpa that he said, it's okay. I didn't hear anything, but the strong feeling came over me that was my mom saying, hey, don't cry, I'm fine. So these things do happen, and they do feel horrific sometimes when you're in the middle of it and you get those chills and you're like, woohoo, this is spooky. But then afterward, when I think about that, it happened 2 more times. I saw 2 more times with hawks outside. And every time I saw them, it was either the spirit telling me that she was fine or her herself. I don't know. But there are things that go between this world and the other world. And that's where horror kind of meets you, when you get into those. Have you ever been in a situation where things slow down, like you were almost about ready to have a car wreck? Have you ever been in another situation like that?
Like bullet time from the games.
Yes.
I once had something similar when I was in high school, and I was riding a bus, one of these small buses, and someone behind me said, be careful. And I turned around, but there wasn't anyone behind me. Like the bus was, there was a woman like at the back of the bus. No one beside me. And I grabbed one of the seats, and then the bus, like one of the wheels hit a pothole on the road, and it was a deep one, and the entire bus like jiggered, and the doors opened, and I was next to them. if I was like I was just standing there, I would have just probably.
Wow.
That is spooky, isn't it?
Can I tell
Wow.
you a spooky thing?
Yeah, it's not uncommon. I've heard a lot of people that I had another car wreck once where I knew it was coming, and the lady was in my lane, and there was no way either of us could move, and everything slowed down really slow. It was like I had time to adjust, and she did end up hitting me, but it gave me extra time. It was the spookiest thing. It was like every second was an hour. and it gave me just enough time to turn my wheel where it wasn't directly head on. I would have jumped the curb if I'd gone any further, and I didn't want to do that. So I had the time to adjust my steering wheel, and she ended up hitting like the left of the car. She had a great big truck too. It would have been bad directly head on. And the way I managed to get my wheel, it was just bad enough that she kind of bounced off me and went across. So even that, just enough for me to have time. I couldn't get it completely out of the way, but it was a warning, and it slowed me down enough that I could do something. And time is spooky, isn't it? When you think about, whenever you're in a horrible experience, have you ever had something like that happen, WD lady?
Not really, but there was one incident where I was driving, and it was because I work so early in the morning, and it was just like this guy was just I don't know if it was a guy or a woman, was just following me, and it was just kind of creepy. I don't know if the person was drunk or whatnot, and I was like, what do I do if this person like follows me all the way to my workplace, because I don't know what to do. But yeah, I had a couple experiences like that.
Yeah. I had to think of that because of, I know I'm not as big as I used to be on Stephen King. I don't read it anymore, but he really brought this up in a short story he had. He called it My Little Pony Time. And he was talking about how kids, it takes forever for a year to pass, but for an adult, time just seems to fly by. It was that whole idea, why does time change all the time? Yeah, why does it go slower sometimes and faster at others? That's one that's always, time is just spooky.
Well, it's spooky, but when you understand the nature of hyperspace, then it becomes less spooky. Or maybe not actually less spooky. Maybe
you can travel in time, and time wouldn't affect you.
Nah, it's not actually like that. But
I don't know. I've seen that movie Event Horizon, so maybe we ought. Maybe we ought not.
That is one scary movie.
I know. Yeah. There's a reason why we shouldn't be traveling in time, because there's paradoxes or other dimensions,
anomalies and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Or like I keep saying that, whenever I see some, people are working on like AI and stuff like that, I'm like, all right, do we need to take these people and like strap them into one of those like the Clockwork Orange chairs and make them watch the first two Terminator movies?
Yeah,
they will most probably tell
nothing after two, because I'm not a monster,
No, they will most probably say that it's never gonna happen because we're better. We can do a better
like
job.
Jurassic Park, they were like, "Oh, we can control everything." Well, no, you can't, because nature, like Malcolm always says, like, nature always finds a way.
Finds a way.
I know somebody who talks about time travel and says that it can't happen, because if you travel back to the time that you were in, you would also travel back to the space that you were in. And the space that the planet Earth was in then won't be the same space as it's in now. So if you can travel back in time, you will materialize where the Earth used to be.
Ooh.
Well, that's one of the theories, because they say you can technically, like Back to the Future, if you return to the past, you can technically, if you don't see yourself, you might be able to, live in the same space, but it would have to be, like you said, like a different alter universe, altercation. It would be, everything would, slightly be different.
Because you changed it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've heard that theory too. But I have to say, living in this world that we're in and seeing how weird time is, actually this whole world is kind of spooky if you want to get down to it, when you start to realize that time isn't normal, and sometimes everything that you think should be the same sometimes. It's getting weird, guys. So I think this is a great thing to do for Halloween this year. I know we didn't keep our masks on, and we didn't keep this going, but I hope that Bob Dub caught a couple of frames with our cute little mask. Should we do it again, Bob Dub?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Did you get pictures of us?
I don't think I got pictures of everyone. I think I did get WD Lady. I did get Robert's, what did you call it? Icon. But I don't know if I got yours.
Okay.
So,
we can do that one after post-production. I just wanted to make sure you got
yes.
WD Lady. Yours was gorgeous, man. That was so cool.
Thank
You had a whole Baldwin the Leper from, what was that movie?
Kingdom of Heaven.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, the design of that mask, I used it for one of my short stories, which I included as a bonus in my storybook.
Oh, cool.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Nice.
Basically, the character, the main character of that story, he has a mask like this. Like the design is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Although it's not just a mask. It's much more.
Much more. So tell us the name of your book and where it's published and everything, Aragma?
It's called The Mandate of Sword and Railgun, and it's a collection of short stories set in the same universe, the Star Shatter universe, of my other books, and you can find it on Amazon. Wait, I might add, like, this book has a most amazing cover made by Neutron Ball. It's one of the best covers I've seen lately.
Well, that's the end of our stories. Pretty much the end of the show, although we carry on for another 15 or 20 minutes, I think, having a chat. So thanks for listening, and see you on the next one.
I have to thank you, Bob Dub, because I'll tell you, I am not technically savvy. I'm just now learning how to do memes, guys.
Yeah.
And she's overlaying videos, so all hats off to you, Bob Dub.
Yes.
Technology doesn't seem to want to work.
Editors should get the proper credit, because without them,
nothing goes, does it?
Nothing goes.
Yeah. It's a tough job. I initially wanted to be an editor in film production, but the stuff that they have to do, I don't have the patience for it.
Oh, I don't think I would either.
It's amazing. It's so strange learning. You start off with just nothing, and you think, I could never get there. And then every day you learn this tiny little new thing. And after a year or two, you're like, wow, how did I learn everything so? So, it's just like everything. Small steps take you there.
I felt the same with writing.
Yeah.
Right.
It's baby steps.
Yeah. I took a couple classes, because I was also trying to go into programming and video game design, and those classes, you're pretty much in a chair, like on the computer for 12 hours.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Looking at the screen.
Yeah. I don't know.
I learned how to program on the job. They had me typing other people's programs, and I'd been doing it for about a year. And one day, one of the programmers came and said, "You know how to program by now. I want you to do this." And he just walked off and left me with this thing. I did it, but it was because I'd been watching how they did it. This was back when they did COBOL. Oh, COBOL. But did I learn? And that's how you learn, just a little step at a time. But when Bob Deb wasn't feeling well and I was sitting here thinking, oh, God, can I do this? I went over and looked at the program she was looking at that she uses. And I'm like, oh, darn, no way. I can't do this. I even sat down with it and tried to do it. I guess it is, though. The more steps you take, when you get out of your comfort zone, you do find out you can learn things. But boy, you get to be my age. It's not as easy. Let me tell you. You lose a few brain cells. And I got to tell you one more thing. This is funny. My son, I was telling him we were going to do this today, and he saw my mask that I got. You know what he said?
What did he say?
You guys are like a bunch of little kids having a costume party. And you know what?
Yes.
I have never been to an adult costume party. I never go anywhere for Halloween. When I was a kid, I hated Halloween. So I told Justin, I said, look, this might seem like a bunch of teenagers acting stupid to you, but this is me at 64 finally having fun.
Yeah, it's all about just being yourself, and since it's Halloween, hey, why not?
And the funny thing that Bob Dub brought up, we were all wearing masks, at least half of us. In a year where who wants to learn about masks? But I think ours were so cool. But it's been just a whole bunch of fun. I do have to ask, I see Do Better in the chat. Are you able to come in and say hi, bye, or anything maybe? Or is your mic not working? I'm just trying to give him a shot here.
8:20. Oh no, that's a message that came in 3/4
Oh, he's
hour ago.
long gone.
No, he's
Okay.
That must be no.
Okay. Yeah. We did have Chris Do Good in here, guys. So just to let you know, he had some technical problems, so we didn't get to talk to Chris too much. But
Well, I feel his pain.
oh, yeah. This is probably one of the smoothest ones we've had yet, by the way, WD Lady. We've had some crazy days. Not
I
being
can
able
only imagine live streaming. That would be even.
That's why we don't live stream.
Gives me lots of practice to not live stream.
A lot of practice to not live stream.
Okay.
Yeah. So everybody have a happy Halloween. We're going to get this together. Bob Dub is going to get this together. I have to give you the credit.
What
And
program does she use?
What is that?
What program does she use to edit the video?
I am so good. I have access to Premiere Pro where I work.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I use sometimes I use iMovie,
Oh,
and because it's like a simplified version of Final Cut Pro, because I used to have Final Cut Pro back in college, and I hated it so much because it would just crash. Like Final Cut Pro would just you would be working on a project and it would just crash and you lose everything and you have to start all over again.
Oh, that's
Yeah, that reminds me of one of the first Windows offices I worked. I wrote, use it to write, and it constantly crashed. When you attempted to save something, it would crash.
Oh, I hate that.
It was disgusting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And in the end, I kind of deleted it, and for a time even used Notepad. But you take notes. I have like probably 200, maybe more draft notes which were written on Notepad.
Well, it's the same thing for even Microsoft Word. Like once you reach like a certain limit, like a page limit, if you have like 700 or 800 pages, it will stop saving for whatever reason. It was just, it's like a strange glitch. Like, because my novels would be so long that Microsoft Word could not keep up saving.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But I like iMovie because when it does crash, even if it's, sometimes it may be frequent, it saves your file. And it will save everything unless you delete everything. Once you delete it, it won't show up. But if it crashes and you put it up, everything is still there, which I actually like.
OpenOffice does the same thing actually. If I have like
auto saves.
Auto saves, yeah. Yeah, so it's been good to me. That's
Yeah.
really
Plus, plus you don't have to pay a freaking subscription fee now. For
Yeah,
Word.
that's crazy.
And you can transform files into PDF files.
I used to have another program, Adobe Photoshop, and now they have like you have to pay, what is it, like $60 or $100 for the subscription? It's crazy, and it used to be a free program for many years.
Or at least you could use like the previous version, and then
Because you would buy like the disc. Of course, they don't make those anymore, but I would have the disc, and you would, just download the program, and you could have that for like years. But now they have it where you can't even, the older programs, for whatever reason, they don't work with any of the like Mac or any of the new computers. They just say you need to get the new version or whatever. It's just really weird.
I was just thinking, you guys that are writers, the biggest horror story for you is probably when you find out it didn't save, isn't it?
Exactly.
Oh, yes.
Like because I'm teaching myself how to do 3D art, and there's been more than a few times I'm working on a comic, and all of a sudden it just, the program I'm using just crashes and shuts down, and I'm like, no, because I've been sitting there screwing around
for hours,
moving everything just so, and spending like half an hour squinting at the screen, and then all of a sudden it just crashes, and I realize I hadn't saved.
Oh my goodness, that's the worst. It's even worse when your computer gets struck by lightning. I've had that happen. Yeah, and the place where I live, we have constant blackouts, so I have to resave everything and put it on like a USB.
Yeah, I'm doing that. I'm doing exactly that, because I also had this happen to me, and I barely fixed that old computer. It's like Lilliput says that my computer, like Armar's computer, is held by duct tape and speed. It's like basically it
sounds
was
like
it.
my laptop.
and I've lost like I had a monitor, a computer monitor, and it I barely fixed it. I barely got enough money to fix it because it got something fried inside from electric.
Was it the motor or like the fan that just kind of?
I have no idea. Something on the circuitry. And I barely got enough money to fix it. I fixed it, and 3 days later there was a lightning strike.
Oh!
and it basically exploded.
Are you serious? What?
And I'm like, oh no, what the? Come on. That was so that
Thor hated your computer personally.
I have no idea.
No.
Every time
thunder shuts you down.
But I've heard of some laptops like actually exploding because the fan overheated. Like certain Mac laptops. Yes. Yeah, like not the newer ones, but like the
older ones.
Yeah, the older ones, because you can't find parts to replace them. So what happens is it just run down and they just catch on fire.
Wow.
That's one of the bad things that fact that it doesn't, like, you can't replace old parts. It doesn't.
I don't know
this
why.
This problem does because they
quit making them.
No, they want to produce everything with planned obsolescence. So you will buy the new product. Right?
Yeah,
this is disgusting. This is really disgusting.
Yeah, because once you buy a computer, it's already obsolete because they already have a newer model coming out within the next week or two.
Yeah.
This thing carries the death penalty in my books. If someone attempts to do it, they'll just get disrupted.
Oh, wouldn't that be funny?
That's why when they build stuff there, like they build it like they should build it and from the best materials.
My dad used to have a old TV, the one that has like the little antennas, and that thing was like working even after like 30, 40 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they built it like they were supposed to.
Yeah, but it was heavy though. For
Doesn't matter. Get stronger.
You could barely even move it. You could barely even move it. But,
My grandmother had a refrigerator. It was a Norge. That thing lasted 50. I kid you not. She got it in the 50s, and it literally just died. My sister had it in her basement. That thing was
I'm sure that you can fix it.
It probably could be if you could find the parts.
Yeah.
Well, because like I have a 22 rifle that I inherited from my grandfather that I told the story about. And yeah, it's like 70 years old and it's still run, I can still shoot dime-sized groups at 50 yards with it when it wants to work because, well, it's 70 years old and the firing pin is going, but
yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. They used to make things with quality.
Old stuff is almost always better.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Almost.
I'm trying to find, I've got a website, bookmarked on my computer that, it's like I keep checking, like, where's that firing pin? Because it's just,
it's hard to find.
I just want to keep it exactly the way the way it is because it's, practically an antique at this point, I'm so dedicated to keeping it exactly the way it was. The scope that was on it broke, and I spent close to 6 months tracking down the exact same model of scope to put on it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Where did you go to find that?
I actually found it on eBay of all places eventually.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the thing is too, I found it was like $10 on eBay. I'm like, yes.
Wow.
That's good.
Yeah.
70-year-old, 70-year-old rifle scope. Yes, I will take it.
You would think that they would probably since it's antique, they would probably jack up the price like what most.
Well,
depends.
One man's junk is another man's treasure.
That's true.
Well, it's not like it's not like from like a high-end manufacturer in the first place. So it was probably pretty cheap 50 years ago when my granddad got it.
Yeah. Yeah, but at least you're keeping something. That's one thing I think is a good thing to do. We kept some stuff from my mom and dad's that we're going to try to keep going to, things that my dad had, an old radio and things like that, just to have something to remember them by. It's nice to have. Really is. And I've lost 2 people with this. Talking about another horror story. Bob Dub and I both are going through. Bob Dub's been a year now. That's another thing that's really tough. Living after your relatives go. It's been a bit of a horror story for me, but we do go on, don't we? We just keep going on.
I think that,
and it's been a heck of a year.
Yeah. I think that the thing for me about Carly committing suicide, the horror and that, is that I had a huge amount of physical things happening to me around that. For about 2 years before she died, I was getting these bizarre shocks on I felt, how I was explaining it to people was, it's as if somebody had thrown a bucket of cold water in my face. And you know that thing where you go, and you sort of pull back. So for 2 years, I kept on having these little things happening on my skin. And I went to the doctor and I said, something's wrong with me, blah, blah. And they said, no, you're fine. When the police came and told me that she was dead, that thing happened on my whole body. I felt it from my fingertips and from my toes. And that whole shock just moved through my body until it got to my chest, and then it just stayed there. And for about 6 weeks after that, I just had this burning tingling in all my muscles. And as time went on, it kind of went lower and lower. And I felt very strongly that I'd been prepared for her death, as if this was something that was going to happen and I had to live through. But something on the other side had been giving me little shocks of horror for 2 years, so that when it happened, I could actually live through it. And I know that that's very bizarre, and it sounds like I should be in an institution. But the
No,
horrible thing
I've
was,
heard of it before.
you have?
Yeah, I have. If you've ever watched, it's on ID, and they have one where it's a show called Where Evil Lives Here, and they have one particular, I can't remember her name, but before her daughter died, she started having like these visions, and like she started having like physical, it's very similar. I've heard like if you watch ID, they have several different shows. They have uh The Neighbor Next Door, they have all these Web of Lies, they have all these shows where people had either had like some sort of, it happens, it's rare, but they had either like a physical reaction, or they had a vision, or they had something before their loved one passed away.
Wow, that's so comforting to know that, because I've been thinking that I was going out of my mind and imagining things, and I couldn't understand how I could be imagining something that was happening before it happened. If it's just the sign, if it's just something that actually happens to many people, that's very reassuring.
Yeah, there was a case, it was a cold case that I had watched about this one family where they were camping, and their daughter had been kidnapped from the camp, and the mother, every night the mother had these horrific dreams or these visions. And when she found out, like, the police eventually came to, um, her house and everything, and said, we can't find your daughter. We don't have any idea where she is." And she already knew that her daughter was dead. She was like, "I know my daughter's dead," because these visions that she had, she already knew that someone obviously had basically tortured and killed her daughter. And I think her daughter was like 5 years old.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
That is just horrendous.
I think there's a lot of
Well, that must.
sorry, I think there's a lot of real utility in people getting together like we are. And I mean, we've sort of woven a story around the stories. And we all experience those moments of horror in life. And it's almost as if reading stories about horror prepares you for your time when your horror comes to you.
Yep. Definitely does. Does that make you feel better, Bob Dub, knowing that you're not the only one that's felt that now?
Oh man, yes, I had no idea. I really thought that it was something strange but knowing that it's just an experience of death, and bizarrely, the stuff that we were talking about time, just earlier on in the show, and saying time goes fast or slow, and my thing of how could things have gone from the present back into the past, to prepare me.
Yeah, time definitely does play a role in whether you see something as a horror or as a relief, doesn't it?
There's another series that because I love ID. I love murder mysteries. Me and my sister will watch murder mysteries all day long. But there's one really good show, Paranormal Witness. And that one, it really is interesting because they have a lot of true stories where people have seen things, like whether they're driving on the road one day late at night, they've seen like some sort of either premonition, and some kind of event eventually comes true. And there was one particular story about a mother and her son I think the boy was like maybe 6 years old, 6 or 7, and they had disappeared driving home late at night. And it's actually a really interesting story because this is a true story. It happened, I believe it was in California, but I'm not really sure, so don't quote me on that one. But basically, what happened is they were missing for 3 days, and people who drove the same road that they did reported seeing like a naked woman in the middle of the road just lying there. And when cops got like word of these people calling in and saying, "Hey, we've seen this woman. I think something's wrong." And one of the officers, he went to the particular spot that they had seen this woman, and he actually, because like the road is steep, so it curves and bends, and then there's a sheer cliff, and he was able to find the mother and the son because they had crashed,
Gosh.
and the mother had died, but the son was still alive. So he believes that the spirit of the mother, was the one on the road trying to tell people that her son was still alive.
Oh, and that was real, actually happened.
Yeah, that's a true story.
Woo.
Yeah.
That's a good one to add.
Thank you.
Wow.
I think that we're going to need to sign off now, sadly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
have
all
to
right.
go too. I got a cat over in the corner going, meow, meow, feed me.
Well, whatever.
But it was great, guys. Thank you so much for coming. I had a blast. And WD Lady, we're going to come after you again for a single interview, by the way, when you have time.
Okay, that would be fine. Thanks.
Yeah, we want to give you your own hour like everybody else gets, you know. But it was so good to see you in here. So now everybody can be waiting for when we have you full time. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. Eric, Mar, don't feel bad that you couldn't tell your story. You did get in here with us and talk, so that was great. And we're going to end it now. Everybody want to say goodbye or something silly for Halloween?
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, everyone. My third favorite holiday. So.
Yes.
I'll end it with, they're coming to take me away, ha ha, ho ho, hee hee, to the funny farm where life is gentle and oh so kind.